and the consequences are not hypothetical. Your bail reform law is the reason that Laken Riley is dead. He should have been in jail in New York, and he wasn't. He went to Georgia. He fled our state because he should have been in prison. These are tragic and real circumstances. In Buffalo, a Venezuelan illegal immigrant hacked his wife to death with an axe. In Syracuse, an Ecuadorian national strangled a young woman on her birthday and dumped her body in a park. In Irondequoit, in Monroe County, a Dominican national slaughtered an entire family, including 2 toddlers, and he set their house on fire. Governor Hochul, you took an oath to serve the citizens of the state of New York, and you've allowed violent criminals who came here illegally to hide in plain sight and to avoid federal officials because of your support for the green light law. You know damn well that the New York State Sheriff's Association, the State Association of Chiefs of Police have both condemned the green light law. Sheriffs from Erie County, Niagara County, Monroe, Albany, Broome, Dutchess, and Oneida counties, multiple parties represented here, not just Republicans, have warned that your law ties their hands. It puts officers' lives in danger, and it shields criminals from accountability. When you refuse to work with law enforcement, when you refuse to hand over data that can protect communities and save lives, you are actively aiding the illegal alien criminals who have crossed our borders and committed violent crimes.
Hello, Patriots. Welcome back to Signal 76. The channel where we expose the truth that mainstream media refuses to tell you. I'm your host, and today we're diving deep into one of the most infuriating displays of political theater I've ever witnessed. We're breaking down the explosive confrontation between Representative Nick Langworthy and New York Governor Kathy Hochul that has every freedom-loving American asking one simple question. How do we get to a point where our own state governments are actively protecting violent criminals over law-abiding citizens? Before we get started, Patriots, I need you to do something crucial right now. Hit that subscribe button, smash the like button, and make sure you watch this entire video because what I'm about to reveal will fundamentally change how you view the immigration crisis in America. The information I'm sharing today is so critical that every patriot needs to hear it. And I guarantee that by the end of this video, you'll have the ammunition you need to fight back against the radical left's dangerous agenda. Drop a comment below and let me know your thoughts because your voice matters in this fight for our nation's future.
Back.
Chair recognizes Mr. Langworthy from New York.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Governor Hochul, yes or no, do you think someone who's committed murder or rape in this country, in that they're here illegally, should have tools at their disposal to avoid deportation?
As the governor, his primary responsibility is to protect the people of New York.
I'm sorry.
Those crimes are abhorrent.
I'm sorry. Whatever response you prepared to give today dwarfs in comparison to your actions as governor. I would like to remind you of someone named Gian Franco Torres Navaro, an illegal alien and suspected leader of a violent Peruvian gang. He was tied to 23 murders in Peru and came to this country illegally across the southern border. He had his victims' faces tattooed on his body, and he was hiding in plain sight in Endicott, New York, for an extended period of time where ICE could not locate him. And why did it take so long to find him? Because policies like your green light law, which blocks ICE and U.S. Border Patrol from accessing critical DMV databases. In fact, it threatens the badges and threatens to charge with felonies any officer that shares that DMV data with federal agents. These agents rely on data to be able to know who they're pulling over on the side of the road. They're taking their lives into their hands every time they're trying to, keep our streets safe. The really sick irony here is that your government in New York, my home state, freely shares that same DMV data with the government of Canada at our bridges in you and my hometown. But it doesn't share that data with your American federal government. Why, Governor?
You're misstating the green light law because
we
are able to cooperate with federal authorities when there's a crime
Why do you shield
involved.
the database, Governor?
Anything they want from us related to investigating a crime
is data that's needed in real time to enforce the laws on the streets. They can't subpoena these records from your government. And I've had these conversations with my county sheriffs all across the state of New York, state police. They want to work with the federal officials. They want to clean up these messes. But they can't because they were being threatened by you and our Attorney General that they'll take away their badge and end their careers.
Been countless instances where we've cooperated with federal law enforcement. It happens on a daily basis. And so your characterization is just incorrect of how we provide information to people who ask for it.
You share the database in its entirety with Canada, but you don't share it with the federal government. It's beyond belief. I mean, this is denial and excuses, Governor. You know damn well that the New York State Sheriff's Association, the State Association of Chiefs of Police have both condemned the green light law. Sheriffs from Erie County, Niagara County, Monroe, Albany, Broome, Dutchess, and Oneida counties, multiple parties represented here, not just Republicans, have warned that your law ties their hands. It puts officers' lives in danger, and it shields criminals from accountability. When you refuse to work with law enforcement, when you refuse to hand over data that can protect communities and save lives, you are actively aiding the illegal alien criminals who have crossed our borders and committed violent crimes. And the consequences are not hypothetical. Your bail reform law is the reason that Laken Riley is dead. He should have been in jail in New York, and he wasn't. He went to Georgia. He fled our state because he should have been in prison. These are tragic and real circumstances. In Buffalo, a Venezuelan illegal immigrant hacked his wife to death with an axe. In Syracuse, an Ecuadorian national strangled a young woman on her birthday and dumped her body in a park. In Irondequoit, in Monroe County, a Dominican national slaughtered an entire family, including 2 toddlers, and he set their house on fire. Governor Hochul, you took an oath to serve the citizens of the state of New York, and you've allowed violent criminals who came here illegally to hide in plain sight and to avoid federal officials because of your support for the green light law. I mean, this is an abomination. This is not keeping New Yorkers safe.
We turn over the information you're referring to all the time. You're misstating the laws and its purpose. We cooperate all the time.
As much as I want to believe you, Governor, I believe the cops more.
Well,
I believe the cops that I know and I trust in our same hometown that are out there in the streets every single day. Your laws put lives in danger. Your laws have led to people being murdered.
My job is to protect the people of New York, and I fight hard every single day. I am
doing a very lousy job of it, Governor.
Reduce the crimes. Murder rates are down to historic lows, and we're working hard to make sure one crime is one too many. I take this very seriously, but we do cooperate when anytime they need help with law enforcement. And you're just
that is just not what the law enforcement officials tell me, Governor.
You're just not accepting the facts. I can't help that.
I trust the professionals. You and I aren't police officers. I trust the people out in the field that wear a badge, that are honorable, decent, hardworking people.
And that's why they should be
you have a record of disrespect to law enforcement, just like you disrespected every corrections officer in the state of New York. You have a lot of gall to come here and criticize the president for using the National Guard to actually bring law and order to the streets of our country. When you sent those same National Guard officers to become corrections officers after you destroyed the lives of so many of the hardworking corrections officers of the state when you broke their union.
You're absolutely right. There is a distinction. I have the authority over the National Guard in the state of New York. The president is usurping the sovereignty of another state, of the 50 states, when he imposes the National Guard against the will of the governor. It's a difference of understanding of basic civics.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Mr. Chairman, I have a unanimous consent request.
I'm sorry?
I have a unanimous consent request.
Proceed.
First, I'd like to seek unanimous consent to enter.
What we witnessed in this hearing wasn't just a political disagreement. It was a masterclass in how the radical left operates when they're backed into a corner. Representative Langworthy, a true patriot from New York, came armed with facts, specific cases, and undeniable evidence of how Governor Hochul's policies are literally getting Americans killed. And what do we get in response? The same tired talking points, deflection, and outright denial that we've come to expect from these leftist politicians who care more about virtue, signaling than protecting their own constituents. Let's start with the elephant in the room, the so-called green light law. This isn't just bad policy. Patriots, this is legislative treason against the American people. Think about what this law actually does. It prevents immigration and customs enforcement and Border Patrol agents from accessing critical DMV databases that they need to identify dangerous criminals who are in our country illegally. These are the same databases that New York freely shares with Canada, but somehow sharing them with our own federal agents to protect American lives is where they draw the line. The sheer audacity of this position is breathtaking. Governor Hochul and her radical allies are literally more willing to cooperate with foreign governments than they are with American law enforcement officers who are risking their lives every single day to keep our communities safe. This isn't just policy disagreement. This is an active betrayal of the fundamental responsibility of government to protect its citizens. Representative Langworthy brought up the case of Gian Franco Torres Navaro, and every American needs to understand exactly who this monster is and what New York's policies allowed him to do. This illegal alien wasn't just any criminal. He was a suspected leader of a violent Peruvian gang who was tied to 23 murders in Peru. Let that sink in for a moment. Patriots. 23 murders. This animal had his victims' faces tattooed on his body as some sick trophy collection, and he was able to hide in plain sight in Endicott, New York, for an extended period because ICE couldn't access the information they needed to track him down. How many Americans could have been saved if law enforcement had the tools they needed to identify this predator before he had the chance to blend into our communities? How many families might still be whole today if politicians like Kathy Hochul cared more about American lives than they do about protecting criminal aliens who have no right to be in our country in the first place? But it gets worse, patriots. The green light law doesn't just block access to information. It actively threatens the careers and freedom of American law enforcement officers who try to do their jobs. Any officer who shares DMV data with federal agents faces felony charges. Think about the insanity of that for a moment. We're threatening to arrest American police officers for trying to help other American law enforcement agencies catch violent criminals. This isn't just backwards, it's evil. Representative Langworthy pointed out that sheriffs and police chiefs across New York, from Erie County to Niagara County to Monroe County and beyond, have condemned this law. These aren't politicians making these statements. These are the men and women who put on the badge every day and put their lives on the line to protect our communities. When they tell us that a law is making their jobs harder and putting lives in danger, we should listen to them, not dismiss them like Hochul does. The New York State Sheriff's Association and the State Association of Chiefs of Police have both condemned the green light law. These are bipartisan organizations representing officers from both parties who are united in their opposition to policies that handcuff law enforcement and empower criminals. When you have that level of unanimous opposition from the people actually doing the work, you know the policy is fundamentally flawed. But Governor Hochul's response to all of this evidence, all of these expert opinions, all of these tragic consequences, denial and deflection. She claims that New York cooperates with federal law enforcement all the time, but that's not what the officers on the ground are saying. That's not what the sheriffs who have to deal with these policies every day are telling us. And it's certainly not what the families of victims are experiencing. Representative Langworthy mentioned the connection between New York's failed policies and the murder of Laken Riley, and this is where the true cost of leftist ideology becomes crystal clear. Laken Riley should be alive today. She was a young woman with her whole life ahead of her, but she was brutally murdered by an illegal alien who should have been in jail in New York, but wasn't because of the state's reckless bail reform laws. Instead, he was allowed to flee to Georgia, where he took the life of an innocent American citizen. This isn't a theoretical debate about policy preferences, patriots. This is about real people, real families, real Americans whose lives have been shattered because politicians like Kathy Hochul refuse to enforce the law and protect their own citizens. Every single American who has been victimized by someone who should have been deported or imprisoned is a victim of these failed policies. The specific cases that Representative Langworthy mentioned should make every American's blood boil. In Buffalo, a Venezuelan illegal immigrant hacked his wife to death with an axe. In Syracuse, an Ecuadorian national strangled a young woman on her birthday and dumped her body in a park. In Monroe County, a Dominican national slaughtered an entire family, including 2 toddlers, and set their house on fire. These aren't isolated incidents. They're the predictable consequences of policies that prioritize criminals over citizens. Every single one of these tragedies was preventable. Every single one of these victims would be alive today if we had leaders who understood that their first responsibility is to the American people, not to virtue signal about their compassion for people who broke our laws to get here and then broke more laws once they arrived. But here's what really exposes the hypocrisy of Governor Hochul's position. When Representative Langworthy pointed out that she had no problem using the National Guard as corrections officers after destroying the careers of hardworking corrections officers throughout the state, she claimed that was different because she has authority over the National Guard in New York. She actually had the audacity to claim that President Trump was usurping state sovereignty by using federal resources to enforce federal law. Hello, patriots. Welcome back to Signal 76, your beacon of truth in these turbulent times. Today, we're diving deep into something that should make every freedom-loving American's blood boil. We're talking about the complete weaponization of our judicial system and how leftist legal scholars are literally admitting on camera that they have different standards for Republican and Democrat presidents. hit that subscribe button right now. Smash the like button and stay until the very end, because what I'm about to show you will blow your mind about how deep the corruption goes. What we witnessed in the Senate hearing is nothing short of a confession of judicial activism at its most naked and partisan level. Senator Josh Hawley absolutely dismantled Professor Shaw in what can only be described as a masterclass in exposing liberal hypocrisy. This wasn't just a hearing, folks, this was an autopsy of our justice system performed in real time. For decades, our founding fathers established a system where courts dealt with specific cases involving specific parties. But starting in the 1960s, we began seeing nationwide injunctions where a single judge could essentially override the will of the American people and bind parties who weren't even involved in the case. This is constitutional chaos, and it's been weaponized against conservative presidents like never before. Senator Hawley brilliantly pointed out that these nationwide injunctions were virtually non-existent before the 1960s. Our republic survived and thrived for nearly 2 centuries without activist judges thinking they could run the country from their benches. But suddenly, when we get conservative presidents who actually want to implement the agenda that the American people voted for, these leftist judges discover this magical power to stop them dead in their tracks. During the Trump administration, we saw an unprecedented flood of these nationwide injunctions. Every single policy that President Trump tried to implement to secure our border, to put America first, to drain the swamp, was immediately challenged by forum-shopping liberal lawyers who would find the most activist judge in the most liberal district they could locate. But here's where it gets really disgusting. Professor Shaw got completely exposed during this hearing. When Joe Biden was facing nationwide injunctions for his radical policies, Shaw called them a travesty for principles of democracy, notions of judicial impartiality, and the rule of law. But when it comes to President Trump facing the same treatment, suddenly Shaw thinks nationwide injunctions are perfectly fine. This is the kind of intellectual dishonesty that is destroying our institutions from within. When Senator Hawley pressed Shaw for a consistent principle that would govern when nationwide injunctions are appropriate, Shaw couldn't provide one. 6 minutes of questioning, and this supposed expert couldn't articulate a single coherent legal principle. Shaw actually suggested that President Trump engaged in much more lawless activity than other presidents, which is why he deserved different treatment. This is the smoking gun, folks. They're not even pretending to apply the law equally anymore. They're openly admitting that they have different standards based on whether they like the president or not. Think about what this means for our constitutional republic. We have law professors teaching the next generation of lawyers and judges that it's perfectly acceptable to have different legal standards for different political parties. This isn't justice. This is exactly the kind of corruption that our founding fathers fought a revolution to escape from. Senator Hawley's questioning also exposed the forum shopping epidemic that has plagued our judicial system. Liberal activists have turned judge shopping into an art form. They know exactly which districts have the most activist judges, and they file their cases there specifically to get predetermined outcomes. The professor's admission that his view of the underlying legal question colors his perception of the remedy is perhaps the most honest thing he said during the entire hearing. At least he acknowledged what we all already knew, that these legal scholars aren't applying neutral principles. They're working backward from their desired political outcomes. This weaponization of the courts isn't just about stopping individual policies. It's about fundamentally transforming our system of government. When unelected judges can override the elected president and Congress through nationwide injunctions, we're no longer living in a constitutional republic. We're living in a judicial oligarchy. Senator Hawley's performance in this hearing should be required viewing for every conservative in America. This is how you fight back against institutional corruption. You don't accept their premises, you don't let them hide behind academic jargon, and you force them to confront their own hypocrisy in plain English. The fact that Professor Shaw couldn't provide a principled basis for when nationwide injunctions are appropriate proves that this entire system has become nothing more than partisan warfare conducted through judicial means. When the Biden administration faced nationwide injunctions, it was a threat to democracy. When the Trump administration faced them, it was necessary to protect democracy. Patriots, this is why we can never give up the fight for judicial reform. We need judges who will apply the law as written, not as they wish it was written. We need an end to forum shopping and nationwide injunctions that allow single judges to override the democratic process. This hearing should be a wake-up call for every American who still believes in equal justice under law. The corruption isn't just in the FBI or the Department of Justice. It's infected our entire legal establishment from law schools to federal courthouses. Patriots, this is why your voice matters. This is why we need you to subscribe, to share this content, to spread the word about what's really happening in our courts. The mainstream media won't tell you this story because it exposes their entire narrative about judicial independence and the rule of law. Stay vigilant, stay informed, and never stop fighting for the principles that made America the greatest nation in human history. The deep state and their judicial allies may think they've rigged the game, but as long as patriots like you keep paying attention and demanding accountability, we still have a chance to restore constitutional government.